Joining us now, Alfredo Ortiz. He's the president and chief executive officer, CEO of the Job Creators Network. They have been on the engine of the small business stimulus package to help small businesses through this trying time. Alfredo, great to have you with us.
Hey, John. How are you doing? Hanging in there?
I'm doing fine, and I got to tell you, I wanted you on today because talk is cheap. I have a real-life experience. I left you a message last night. So our bank, Bayport Credit Union, little bank in Southeast Virginia that we've been doing business with since I started my company in 2010, I believe. January 2nd, 2012, we started this company. So we got their application yesterday for the small business loan that we qualified for. So my banker sent it to me at 3:30 p.m., the official application. Now, I want to walk you through this, Alfredo. Just like you said, it was one page. Just like you said, it didn't have to go through the SBA. It went through our bank. Just like you said, it was easy to understand. So my wife, Ann, who's our CFO, we sat down at 5 o'clock, and she did the application in exactly 50 minutes. Everything done, all the paperwork, all the documentation, scanned and fax emailed to our banker, even though it's not due till Friday. She did the whole thing in under an hour, including all of the backup documentation, all of the worksheets, and I sat there with her. In under 1 hour, we got this submitted, just like Alfredo Ortiz said. Brilliant.
Well, I am thrilled to hear that, John. Obviously, there are obviously a few kinks. I'm getting a lot of phone calls and texts and stuff like that. But using our existing, lending platform, where it's your local, whether it's your community bank, whether it's your regional bank, a branch of a larger national bank, that really, I think, was the right way to go on this. I know there's also the SBA process, and you can go through that process as well. But I just firmly believe, and I'm just recommending to everybody, is just make the appointment. Technically, the loans go live Friday. People are starting. The lenders should have received their stuff, like you said yesterday. So they're going through that right now. They're putting it into their systems, understanding exactly what it is. But hopefully, fingers crossed, 80+% of these loans should go through relatively seamlessly when you go to your bank.
For the small business owners, this is a painless process. Now, there's obviously, you have to have all the documentation like any bank requires. So, look, if you're running a small business, you already have that. You've got QuickBooks. You've done
right.
your 2018 or 2019 taxes. You've got your P&L. You've got all that stuff done. Anybody that has a company does that. But it was seamless and easy. I mean, it took us under an hour. They also then have the criteria on the worksheet where you can see how you apply the money so that the percentage of it is forgiven, how it's forgiven. You've got to meet the same payroll you have or more. You can apply 25% of it. 75% has to be to payroll. 25% can be to utilities or rent. But the purpose of this is to give you the cash flow you need to keep going. And then
remember what we talked about? It's about keeping your employees on standby, right? That instead of the power down, it's the standby, right? Keeping them going. It's not intended to make up for lost revenues, and people have to understand that that's not what this is for. It will not make up for your lost revenues. It's just trying to offset your expenses during this crisis.
Exactly, so that you keep your business open. Your employees are not laid off. They don't have to go on unemployment. You don't have to retrain new people when it gets back up. It's kind of how do I get through April? If I get through April and get through the first part of May, things start to open up again. Because a business like ours, obviously we have restaurant advertisers, we have other retailers. Well, they're not advertising now because they're not open, so you can't advertise. So that revenue's gone. But you nailed it. It's not to make up the revenue. It's to get you through April and some of May, May, so that you're able to pay your employees, pay your rent, pay the things you have to pay, so the money funnels up.
Yeah, that's right, John. I mean, if probably the best way, if I could, talking to all small business owners out there, I mean, me being one of them, during this period, during this crisis, the reality is that everybody's goal should be to break even at best. I mean, that's just the reality. I hate saying that.
You want to break even, right? Exactly.
Right? That's it, right? You want to keep your business and break even. It's not about how much money am I going to make, right? Am I going to be able to make that trip to Italy? There were, whatever. Well, we can't take anywhere this whole first half anyways, but the idea is, how do you break even, right? And so keep your employees whole, keep your employees there ready so you don't lose them. Because, again, as I say, we will get past this. And there's every single day that passes, there are amazing things that are happening from a testing standpoint, from a therapeutic standpoint, works on vaccines. I mean, we are moving things at record speeds thanks to President Trump and how he has been working with private industry. I mean, I don't know about you, but this I would imagine this is kind of what it felt like a little bit like during World War II, when you really saw America kind of unite and private enterprise comes in, helping government, coordinating, and doing the right thing for America, right? And it's quite frankly, I'm focused right now on that because that's encouraging, right? And then you also know right now we're all hunkered down and we have these shelter-in-place orders across the country and stuff like that in multiple states, but we're going to get out. Those are going to be lifted. And I'll tell you right now, John, that people are going to want to leave their homes, right? They're going to want to travel. They're going to want to spend their money, right? I mean, people are going to feel like, oh, my gosh, I don't want to be in my house right now. I want to be outside. Right, and you want to be ready for that, and so that's why these loans I'm excited about because it's simple. I'm really glad to hear your example there, real life example, because that was the intent, right? Make it as easy as possible. Everybody's still going to, when you sign that, I mean, you still have the responsibility that if you commit fraud, you're going to go to jail.
That's right. It says that right on there. It's like your tax return. If you falsify anything, it says right on there, you will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. So. Whatever's on there has got to be honest. But look, you have all the papers to back it up, and
right.
You have all the paperwork to back it up, and then there's all the criteria that says, here's what you have to do to get the loan forgiven. But you're right. The purpose is get through the next 2 months, survive, so that when this ebb, you can get back to business. But the other great thing with it, Alfredo, having myself lived through the disaster with my business of 2008, where the money came to the banks and never made its way down, right? Now what you're doing is it's coming right to the companies and making its way up. So, for instance, you get the loan so that you can pay your rent, which then means the landlord has the money to pay their mortgage, which means the bank has the liquidity, to make their payroll and for them to stay in business. And you pay your employees that can then pay their rent. I mean, it funnels up rather than waiting for it to come down. And of course, in the 2008 debacle, it all got gobbled up by the banks and never made it down. But you guys have done a fabulous job here. The other thing you guys have done that I want to be sure that our audience knows, the Job Creators Network has also, you guys have been a big player in getting the FDA to get testing done and get the new testing approved, and also some of the new remedies. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we were pretty concerned about is more of a supply thing, right? Because the last thing we want to be in the business of is telling doctors what to do, right? As you know, we've been running Healthcare for You before this crisis hit, our Healthcare for You program, and that was all about the patient-doctor relationship and making sure that people understood that is a sacred relationship that we should not touch, right? What a patient-doctor does together, that is something that we should be, protecting all the time. And that's what we were promoting through our Healthcare for You. So what we saw was that there were doctors out there that believed that they should be using that protocol with their patients, but the access to supply wasn't there. And then when we looked at it a little bit more, we realized that there was supply, there were doses, millions of doses sitting in warehouses across the country, but they couldn't go anywhere, right, because of the FDA and not allowing that as an actual use. In that particular case, the hydroxychloroquine and the chloroquine as part of the protocols. So we were just more focused on the supply piece. We're not going to get into the business of telling or recommending which protocols to use, but we just believe firmly, and I'll be honest with you, I mean, even my doctor, I called him, I said, is this real? And he's like, yeah, he goes, I'm using it in my patients and it seems to be working. Let me prescribe you something. I'm like, okay, that's great. I went to go get it filled. and they literally said, we're not even accepting scripts because we're not allowed to. And so I'm like, wait, how does that make sense? They're like, well, there's not enough inventory. I go, but I just read that there's 100 million doses sitting in a warehouse, right? And so that's where we kind of, took some action, and we were happy to we had about 750 doctors that actually signed the petition that says, in the cases where doctors make that decision between, them and their patients, we would love to be able to have the supply there so that the patients can get the medication, the prescriptions filled. So we were involved from that perspective. So we were very happy with that, John.
Well, look, that's going to make a huge difference. And now that we have this loan money accessible to small businesses, they can see their way clear for April. Everybody knows now it's going to be a very, very tough April, maybe some of May. When?
Remember what I said, right? The next 45 days, just hunker down, batten down the hatches. It's going to get ugly. But I think people need to hear that, right? So they're like, okay, it's going to be ugly. All right, I get it. So what do I do, right? I got to batten down the hatches. But again, I want to really keep talking about the post piece, right? Because we're going to recover. We're going to get out of this. And things are changing in such a positive way so quickly, literally by the hour. But that's what people just have to realize, that don't give up, right? I mean, that's just not, I jokingly tell people we're Americans, not Americans, right?
That's right.
Right? I mean, that's what makes us really, truly an unbelievable country.
So what is your vision for this, Alfredo? You've been on a couple times this week, and you've been very bullish on the post period of COVID-19. What is your vision? Outline that for us. Time frame. What do you think happens?
I mean,
what does that look like?
No crystal ball, but I certainly see, the end of third quarter, things start really looking much, much, much better. And all that pent-up demand, there's a lot of the stuff that people are just going to make up. I mean, people are going to go to restaurants more often. They're going to go to movies more often. They're going to travel more often, right? And so I think we're going to have a really, really strong end of third quarter. Like I said, we're going to have to get through this ugly period. Obviously, Congress and D.C. is stepping up. They're providing the funds to stabilize the economy. Lifelines for small business seem to be out there, and I think they probably would be open if we continue seeing that issues. I'm sure there will be more. We're actually working on what we're calling the Main Street Recovery Act. I mean, just our wish list of small businesses to say, in a perfect world, in this post-recovery period, here's what we would love to happen for small businesses. John, as you know, 30 million small businesses out there, 60 million people employed. That was kind of the number we had before this crisis. But they are the backbone of our country, and 2/3 of new job growth was in their hands. Just over 50% of total payroll was in the hands of small business owners. So this is the engine that really led to this great economic revival we were having literally just a few weeks ago. But I'll tell you, we also know that we were having such a great economy going into it that it's kind of like a healthy person that gets sick, right? Mm-hmm. They tend to recover faster because they went into it healthy, versus a sick person that goes into sickness, right? They don't recover as quickly. And so, when you start adding this up, and just what you see overall, even right now, businesses, for example, restaurant owners that in counties or in cities, for example, where they said there's no more sit down, right? The only thing you can do is drive through. And you would think, every restaurant that has a drive through might as well close up shop, no opportunity. I love the ingenuity that the next day, for example, I saw a coffee shop, and I drove by and it says, we now have a drive-through. And you know what they did, John? They pulled out their POS, they popped up an umbrella, they put a table, right, dragged their cash register, and literally had a drive-through.
Right.
Right? And I sit there and I go, that's what makes America so wonderful, right? That ingenuity, that innovation, we're going to see that. And people are going to unite. They're going to want what they had before, and I just really believe that. And so that's why I'm so bullish. It is going to get ugly, and that's why I just keep telling people. I want people to understand that, brace themselves, prepare yourself. But we're going to get through it, and then we're going to get back to that wonderful life that we were living just a few weeks ago.
We're with Alfredo Ortiz, President and CEO of the Job Creators Network. Go to jobcreatorsnetwork.com. By the way, if you own a small business and you want to know how does this loan work, it's confusing. It's not. Go to jobcreatorsnetwork.com. It's right on their website. It took Ann 1 hour, under an hour, I should say. It's about 50 minutes to get through all the paperwork. which is a one-page app. Everything is there. Worksheet is there. It's really easy to do. It's clear. And if you run a small business, you've already got all those documents. But go to thejobcreatorsnetwork.com, and that'll explain it all. So, Alfredo, you mentioned the Main Street Recovery Act for small businesses post the coronavirus. Now we've got politicians in Washington talking about another $2 trillion infrastructure package. Really has nothing to do with small businesses at all. They see that as creating public works jobs, rebuilding roads, bridges, etc. What is your reaction to that?
Well, I have to tell you, John, I just have flashbacks of shovel-ready projects, right? We all remember that. So a little bit concerned. I guess if you want to look for the positive of anything, I mean, given that everybody's at home, it's a great time to work on the road because there are no cars. So from that perspective, and it does keep people employed. But there's just, to me, the infrastructure jobs I'm always concerned about because they always seem to the money just kind of seems to float away.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not an infrastructure specialist in any way, shape, or form, but I guess if there's a way of making sure that doesn't happen, I mean, I'm sure we learned from our mistakes from the last go around when we did this with shovel-ready projects, and we somehow put guardrails in place, John. I mean, we do need to keep people employed, I guess.
But maybe we should look at the first $2.2 trillion stimulus package we've done and execute that flawlessly and see how that goes before we spend another $2 trillion. Because that's going to put our deficit in the $30 trillion range. So I don't know. It gets worrisome, and I don't trust the politicians. And now they're running around saying, "Well, we just did and actually it's not even $2.2 trillion because if you look at the $4 trillion that was made available by the Fed to bank liquidity,
right.
It's $6 trillion. So it's just like, where do you stop this thing? I think we need to let it play out a little bit.
Well, and yeah, I mean, we definitely need to make sure we're careful about this, or we're going to bankrupt us in the future. But we also know we've got an economy that we can't let go, right? I mean, it like I said, it was strong going into this, and so I'm a firm believer there will be strong coming out of it. But one thing too, John, I mean, think about this: businesses and even consumers alike, we had pretty decent balance sheets, right? Cash reserves were there. People's savings accounts were up, higher than they ever had been. So, again, the situation going into this was relatively positive, and that's again why I'm so optimistic and bullish that we're going to get out of this. We're going to be spending a lot of money to do it, but not doing anything is also not an option, right? And so we just have to be thoughtful about what we're doing from that perspective. But again, things like this, the 3P program, the Paycheck Protection Program, I'm encouraged because I think there's a true ease there, and I think it is going to help small business owners. The one thing I would say is we though can't just depend on the government to have every solution, right? And that's where people have to understand. I mean, it's kind of in the words of Kennedy, not ask what your government can do for you, but what you can do for your country, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, from that perspective, there are things that we all could do as well, even as individuals. I tell people, for example, your local small businesses, if they have gift cards, restaurants, service providers, right? If you have the wherewithal to do that, buy some of those, right? Help them out with their own cash flow by doing that. And, there's little things that every one of us can do to try to get through the situation. And that's why I say if we all hold hands and believe that there is going to be a brighter future outside, on the other end of this, and I truly believe that, we will get through it.
Alfredo Ortiz, Job Creators Network. I would say JCN is the most valuable player in this PPP, in the small business process, because you guys really drove the entire agenda from the one-page application to the way these loans were done, to the forgiveness aspect, to the payroll aspect. You guys did a magnificent job, and I know that Bernie Marcus is the chairman of your organization. I mean, he should be immensely proud of what his organization, under your leadership, Alfredo Ortiz, was able to do, because, again, we can talk about this stuff, but then there's actually going through it and applying for it like we did. So I'm a real life example that it's very effective, and it was exactly what you said it would be. It is. So thank you.
And I have to tell you, so thank you, John. But we really got to give the shout outs to Senators Rubio and Collins as well. I mean, these were elements that they worked hard to get in that bill, and also Secretary Mnuchin. I mean, to pull this off in the time frame that he did. I mean, this is Herculean, and the fact that we can actually, have this implemented the way it's going to work and the way it's going to take place on Friday. I mean, I'm just so encouraged. And again, shout outs to all three of those.
Alfredo Ortiz, the CEO and president of the Job Creators Network. Go to jobcreatorsnetwork.com. Everything is right there. It's at your fingertips. It's all on their website to understand it, and it's easy to do and read. And so if your business qualifies, you definitely want to take advantage of it so you can keep paying your employees. Alfredo, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, John, and stay safe out there.